Nintendo is a weird company. Ever since it was founded almost 150 years ago back in 1889, they've never exactly stuck to the norm. Jumping from selling playing cards to questionable hotels and then becoming a toy company, they've always been open to try new things if it meant success for them. And it wasn't until the late 1970s and especially early 1980s that Nintendo finally found its footing creating and selling video games. But as the game industry evolved and companies like Sony and Microsoft became more and more hyper-focused on graphics and power, Nintendo stuck to their creative roots and realized that instead of trying to stand out by having the most powerful system with the best looking games, they could instead stand out with their inventiveness, innovating and creating products that at first glance look absurd because they don't stick to the norm of the industry, but after clever marketing and good games that showcase the product's abilities, become worldwide phenomenons that completely blow the rest of the competition out of the water. Now, this strategy hasn't always worked for Nintendo. A specific gamepad-centered console and early VR headset come to mind, but in most cases it has. And the one example that in my eyes is one of the pinnacles of their creativity and innovation is the Nintendo DS. To date, this is Nintendo's best-selling console, and the second best-selling video game console in general, with an astounding sales total of over 154 million units sold, only a mere million away from the PS2. The DS has without a doubt had a huge impact on a lot of people, myself included. And in this video, I want to take a look back at this system and see what made it such an amazing console, and why a majority of its library still holds up extraordinarily well today. So without further ado, my name is Mariomikester and welcome to a Nintendo DS retrospective. Released here in North America on November 21st, 2004, the DS was Nintendo's next big innovative attempt at handheld gaming. Although initially was not meant to replace Nintendo's current handheld system, the Game Boy Advance, being instead marketed as a third pillar alongside the GBA and GameCube. Development for the DS began in mid-2002, with the idea of a dual-screen system coming from Nintendo president at the time, Hiroshi Yamauchi. Yamauchi couldn't stress enough how important the DS's success was to Nintendo's future, due to the GameCube's lackluster sales. Even going as far to say that if the DS succeeds, they'll rise to heaven, but if it fails, they'll sink to hell. And although this seems like a slight overreaction, due to how much the gaming industry was changing and evolving around the time of the DS's development, it probably wasn't too far of a stretch. And as work on the DS progressed, an emphasis on touchscreen capability and overall simplicity was a big focus for Nintendo. You see, shortly after conceptualizing the DS, Hiroshi Yamauchi stepped down as president of Nintendo, and was succeeded by the legendary Satoru Iwata. Iwata didn't just want the DS to be innovative, he knew it would be almost impossible to compete with Sony's PS2, and attract that hardcore audience that dominated gaming at the time. So, he wanted to adopt a new strategy, and the DS was the perfect subject for this, hence the initial third pillar idea. With the DS, Iwata was planning to introduce an entirely new audience to Nintendo and their games, by appealing to the extremely broad and untapped casual audience who didn't care about how powerful a system was, or how hardcore its games were, but instead enjoyed simple, innovative fun. And so the development of the system was very much geared towards this idea once Iwata took over, with the console sporting the exact same button layout as a Super Nintendo controller, and even featuring a stylus pen for the new touchscreen. However, although development for the console itself was going remarkably well, there was one big thing Nintendo was missing when it came to launching the system: games. A strong launch title, or titles, are instrumental when it comes to the initial reaction a system will get on release. And in order to best demonstrate the DS's capabilities, graphically and functionally, Nintendo settled on one main game they wanted to push the system with: Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 is what launched the N64 all the way back in 1996, and introduced a lot of people to 3D gaming, and was the game at launch to show off what the N64 could do. With the DS, Nintendo wanted to emulate this. Not emulate, sorry, Nintendo doesn't like that word. Mimic. They wanted to mimic this with the DS, and again use Mario 64 to show off their console. And so, Super Mario 64 DS was born. And at E3 2004, it, along with the DS, were finally revealed to the public, receiving amazingly positive reception. Upon booting up the system, you're met with its relatively simple home menu. You got a clock and a calendar on the top screen, and the more interesting stuff like the DS game slot, PictoChat, and a GBA game slot on the bottom screen. The inclusion of the GBA slot here is pretty interesting though, because despite initially being marketed as a third pillar between the GameCube and GBA, almost every DS console model released featured a slot at the bottom of the system for GBA cartridges. So much for existing alongside each other. Regardless of that, even though this home menu is pretty bare bones at first glance, there's actually a lot to it. Heading into the settings, you can actually personalize your console quite a bit here. You can enter your name into the console, which is what would show up in online games. You can select your favorite color, which will change the color of the borders on the top and bottom screen. And you can even put your birthday in it, and on that day, your DS's startup chime will sound a little different. And if you enter a chat on PictoChat, it'll let everyone know it's your birthday and wish you a happy birthday, which is super cute. I really love how despite the simplicity of this home menu, there's a lot you can do to personalize it and make it your own, which is just such a Nintendo thing, especially in this era, with the Wii releasing not too long after the DS. But messing around on the home menu isn't the only thing you could do here if you didn't feel like playing a game. You also had the option of chatting it up with other local DS owners in PictoChat. PictoChat is something I really wish I could have experienced in its prime. The app didn't require an internet connection, but instead used a wireless local connection that had a range of about 60 to 100 feet, and allowed you to join chat rooms with people, where you could draw or text each other about whatever you felt like. And in the DS's prime, with its insane sales, if you lived in a big neighborhood, or especially in an apartment building in a big city, these chat rooms would always have at least a couple people in them, and could help you meet other fellow DS owners and possibly become friends with them. Or at least that was what Nintendo hoped people would use it for. While yes, a majority of the users chatting on PictoChat were fellow harmless DS fans who just wanted to make friends, due to the anonymity of the app and the fact that it could only connect to people relatively close to you, a very small amount of people used it for not so great purposes. Which around 2006 to 2007, when the DS really started to take off, attracted the attention of a lot of news outlets, who did these hilarious reports claiming Nintendo was an evil company and was lying about their consoles. Obviously Nintendo isn't evil and wasn't lying about the DS to trick parents, but it's really funny watching some of these news reports back and hearing what they'd say.
It has lots of graphics.
It has graphics. In the end, PictoChat was an amazing application to come bundled in with the DS. It was a great way to meet fellow local DS owners, draw funny pictures on the screen, and just mess around when you were bored. That unfortunately, due to an incredibly small amount of weirdos, was absolutely ruined by the news. Enough about PictoChat and the home menu though. Easily the most important aspect of a game console is the games themselves. And in the DS's case, this console has one of the best portable lineups ever. New Super Mario Bros. DS, The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, Animal Crossing Wild World, Nintendogs, Mario Kart DS, and so many other iconic titles not only defined the DS's library, but also took amazing advantage of the console's capabilities. A game like Nintendogs, for example, uses the touchscreen and microphone of the DS incredibly well, and allows for so many engaging and cute ways to interact with the dogs. Obviously, you can of course pet them by rubbing their heads on the bottom screen, but you can also play games like Fetch with them, and even call out their name and teach them to do tricks by using the microphone. Nintendogs wasn't a game I grew up with, but playing it for this video made me realize just how creative the gameplay gimmicks in this game really are. Going to the store to buy a brush for the dog and then brushing the dog with the touchscreen, competing in contests, taking your dog for a walk. It's not something you'd expect to be that fun to do in a game, but due to how intuitive the DS is, it's definitely a game I would have loved growing up. But I mean, if we're talking about super creative uses of the DS, I obviously have to talk about Brain Age. Brain Age is one of the big games on the DS that really defined the system as not just a console for gamers, but for everyone. Brain Age is all about learning, and well, training your brain, which is not what most people go to video games for. However, with this title literally being the 4th best-selling game on the console, it's clear there was a lot of love for it. And that's because a relatively big part of the DS's user base were adults and elderly people who had never shown interest in video games before, but because the DS wasn't marketed as just a game system to play in your free time, and instead could be multiple things like a drawing pad, a learning tool, or a cooking simulator, it became incredibly popular among just about everybody. Doing math problems and reading exercises for 30 minutes in Brain Age, and then drifting my ass off in Mario Kart DS after, really made me feel a lot better about myself. Speaking of Mario Kart DS, although I've only talked about Nintendogs and Brain Age, franchises that got their start on the DS and were built around its features, existing franchises also had amazing entries on the system, with one of my absolute favorites being Mario Party DS. Mario Party DS honestly should have been a launch title with how great of a showcase of the DS it is. The minigames here are a total blast. Blowing into the microphone to blow out the candles on the candle jumping game, winding up this toy car on the bottom screen and steering it along to avoid any obstacles, dragging food onto this conveyor belt in order to knock out your opponents, it's so cool. I'm such a sucker for silly gimmicks like this, and Mario Party DS is full of them. The whole game also taking place in giant real-life locations like gardens, backyards, and living rooms also lends super well to how creative this is. And the boards probably do the best at showcasing this. Wiggler's Garden, Toadette's Music Room, DK's Stone Statue, and the rest of the boards here are so detailed and show just how powerful the DS was for the time, being able to render these fully 3D environments. This is also one of the only Mario Party games to actually have a cohesive story that genuinely complements the gameplay. The plot here is that Bowser shrinks everybody, and that's why all the minigames and boards seem to take place in giant locations, and I love that. This game is easily the most underrated in the entire Mario Party series, and it deserves a lot more attention. But while some games took full advantage of the DS and its gimmicks, others were very conservative in their uses, like for example Mario Kart DS. For the console it released on, Mario Kart DS is one of the most traditional Mario Karts out there. It doesn't have any game-changing uses of the touchscreen or microphone, but rather instead takes advantage of the DS's portability and graphical capability, creating a super great portable racer for the time. Being able to just lay in bed and play a fully 3D Mario Kart game was super cool back in 2005. And what made it even better is that Mario Kart DS, and well the DS itself, had online multiplayer. While at release the DS didn't have any online functionality, with the release of Mario Kart DS in 2005, also came the release of Nintendo WFC, better known as Nintendo Wi-Fi Connection. This made the DS Nintendo's first entirely wireless online console, with tons of games on the system making use of the online functionality. And I mean, just being able to play Mario Kart online in the first place was probably enough to sell a couple hundred people on the system, because at the time, this was something you hadn't ever been able to do before. The only downside to Mario Kart DS's online, however, was that just about half of the tracks available in the game couldn't be played online due to hardware limitations, and that only 4 players could race at once instead of the usual 8. In the end though, this didn't bother many people as the online was already enough for them. And with all the incredible games the DS had, and how they took such great advantage of the console's unique features, this system is easily one... Wait, that's what the DS looked like at launch? That thing's ugly! Yes, despite being a worldwide phenomenon at launch with a stellar lineup of games within its first 2 years, the DS had one big problem in its starting years. The console was just ugly. I mean, it's got this weird gray and black color scheme, the design is just clunky, and overall it was not very aesthetically pleasing to look at all. Fortunately, just a year and a half into its lifespan, the DS would receive a brand new model, the DS Lite. And oh my god is this design so much better than the original. The DS Lite is so much more sleek, the buttons aren't horrendously ugly, start and select are positioned in much better places, and the console actually looks cool now. But an actually good design isn't the only thing the DS Lite improved upon the original. The DS Lite also had a much brighter screen, a longer battery life, and even a bigger stylus that matches the sleek look of the system. This redesign was something the console desperately needed, but wasn't the only new model the DS would receive in its lifespan. 2 years later in 2008, Nintendo would unveil and release the DSi. The DSi didn't change the sleek design too much, but did come with a plethora of new features. Not only was this system substantially more powerful than the DS Lite and original DS, it had a bigger screen, an SD card slot, and 2 cameras, one on the front of the system and one on the back. The only thing lost with the DSi was the GBA slot present on both the DS Lite and original DS. And while it sucked to lose that backwards compatibility, the new features of the DSi more or less made up for it. Now the system had an entirely new home menu and some new built-in apps to mess around with. You could play around with your voice in Nintendo DSi sound, and take pictures and videos and add funny edits to them in the camera app. I think the biggest thing people don't talk about at all when it comes to the DSi is that this is when it really felt like the DS had fully moved on from the GBA and GameCube, and now had become entirely synonymous with the Wii, even featuring its own version of the Wii Shop channel, aptly named the DSi Shop. The DSi Shop was home to hundreds of DSiWare games, as Nintendo called them, which were basically tiny little games no bigger than 16 megabytes in size, that you could buy for a couple dollars to download and mess around with. Easily the most popular app here was free, however, being the ever-famous Flipnote Studio. Flipnote was an app you could use to make simple frame-by-frame animations by using the touchscreen to draw. Flipnote has gained a lot of attention within the last year, with animations made in the app going viral on TikTok.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it!
I absolutely love these. The combination of the simple but well-made drawings and the DSi's awful microphone make for some hilarious animations. Shout out to all those Flipnote creators out there, especially Rax the Flipnote, creator of the legendary Gamblecore video. Overall, the DSi was a great upgrade to an already great system, and really was the final big thing that made the DS and Wii synonymous with each other. Stepping back a bit, I think there's one amazing feature that every DS model has that I've neglected to mention so far. Download play. Back in the days of the GBA, if you wanted to trade Pokemon with a friend or race each other in Mario Kart Super Circuit, you had to do so through the Game Boy Link cable. This cable was annoying, short, and only worked when it wanted to. With the DS, however, playing games locally with friends was easier than ever with Download Play. The best part about this app is that only one person had to own the game, with the others being able to download the game through the app and play with you. So many amazing titles on the DS supported this feature, and have given me some great memories of playing with friends. Super Mario 64 DS had this mode where you would compete to see who could collect the most stars in the time limit, with you being dropped into one of a few maps from the games and being able to attack each other and steal the stars back. Mario Kart DS let you race with friends, with them only being able to play as Shy Guys, a character exclusive to Download Play. Mario Party DS let you experience the game pretty much just as you would if you owned it, allowing you to play as any character you want. Download Play was one of the coolest ways to play DS games with other people, and to this day is something I'm surprised Nintendo included given how stingy they can be sometimes. Regardless, the memories I hold playing Mario Kart DS or New Super Mario Bros. Multiplayer with my friend will never not be special to me. The Nintendo DS is a special console. It was released in a time when Nintendo's future was uncertain, the gaming industry was changing, and the GameCube wasn't doing very well. However, Nintendo still had one trick up their sleeve, and that trick ended up being the most successful handheld console to date, and the second best-selling console of all time. Its unique features like the touchscreen, microphone, and just dual screens in general laid the groundwork for developers to make some of the most enjoyable portable games of their time, which still hold up remarkably well today. Games like Mario Party DS, Nintendogs, and Brain Age took amazing advantage of the unique features of the system, and drove tons of people who would have never picked up a video game controller in their life to stores so they could pick up a DS and a handful of its casual-friendly games. While titles like Mario Kart DS and New Super Mario Bros. Appealed to Nintendo's core audience, not including intense touch controls or dual-screen action, instead taking advantage of the portability and graphics of the system. The DS was a console that was for everybody, and Iwata's impact on the gaming industry with this console, and his plan to introduce more people to gaming with the DS, is one that should never be forgotten. And from its worst design, wow that thing is ugly, to its best design. The DS proved that gaming could be more than just a hobby, and was for more than just hardcore gamers who wanted to shoot things. I mean, you could learn, you could become an artist, hell, you could take care of an animal if you wanted to. And after almost 20 years, this console has stood the test of time, and is still remembered incredibly fondly to this day for its profound impact it's had on so many people. So thank you, Nintendo. Thank you for the games and console family that defined my and so many others' childhoods.